I think we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Find a seat, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the special meeting of the Landmark Commission. This is actually our second public meeting to review the proposed changes to the City of Cleveland Heights' landmark ordinance. I'm reading my script so I don't forget what I say. And as most of course, the people at the table, but many of you probably already know, this has been actually a very long and thoughtful process. Way back in 1973 is when Cleveland Heights created a landmarks program. More recently, in 2019, is when we updated the landmark ordinance in order for us to become a certified local government, which is a state process. And then that designation enables funding to be available for certain preservation-related activities. One of those subsequent activities that we did was hire the firm that's here with us now to create our design guidelines, which have been in since October of 2021. Those guidelines are a guideline, but they are helpful information for any homeowner in Cleveland Heights, but particularly for landmark owners, property owners, with ideas on how to maintain and preserve your home. So we created those in October of 2021, and since then the Commission has been talking about doing further updates to the ordinance. We received funding through that CLG, Certified Local Government process or program, so that we can again hire Naylor Wellman to help us with the update of our current ordinance. So that's where we are right now. Updating the landmark ordinance is part of a citywide project to review, evaluate, and update all of its ordinances and zoning codes. The Landmark Commission is pleased to participate in this citywide process. We believe that all of it helps to preserve and protect the buildings that are in our city and really help to tell our story and make our city of Cleveland Heights special. It also helps to stabilize and improve property values. It's a way to enhance and celebrate the character and diversity of our city and, of course, foster civic pride. So that's what we're here to do today, is to, at our second public meeting, to present the most recent version of what we have done with our proposed landmark ordinance changes. Public input is welcome. That's why you're all here today, hopefully. We will do that at the end of the presentation. Today, it will be essentially a listening tour for the Landmark Commission members and city staff members to listen to what you all have to say about these proposed changes. So, next up is Eric. Do we need to do a attendance?
You should do an attendance.
Okay, so let's do an attendance. We'll just go around and say our names. My name is Maisie Adams. I am the chair of the Landmark Commission.
Hi, Jim Edmondson. I've been on the commission about 12 years. Before that, I was head of the District Museum of Medical History and Case. I was there for 37 years, and I lived in Cleveland Heights since 1983.
Ken Goldberg. I've been here since '77. I've been on the Landmark Commission in 2 shifts over 20 years. I'm president of the Historical Society. I've been on the Improvement Board Committee many years, and I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee for a while.
I'm Margaret Lane, Landmark Commission, maybe 8 years, and I work for the Cleveland Restoration Society.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Lader. I'm an architect. I've been on the Landmarks Commission for about 10 years and lived in Cleveland Heights for about 30.
Hi, my name's Danny Cohen. I've been on the commission about a year. I've lived in Cleveland Heights for about 3 years, and I work at LDA Architects. I'm a historic preservation specialist.
So I'm going to stand over here just so I can get into the screen, as you can see there. So thank you all, first of all, for coming tonight. I'm Eric Zamp. I'm the Director of Planning Development for the city. With me on staff is...
Hi, I'm Brooke Siggers. I'm a city planner.
And you were probably greeted by Christy Lee from the planning department downstairs, so she's welcoming people. And we're excited to be here as well. We have both a virtual and in-person version of this. This is being recorded. We're going to post it online so people who couldn't be here tonight can watch these proceedings. And I think Maisie said it really well. This is really about hearing about all the good work that Naylor Wellman has done with a lot of the conversations with the Landmark Commission. We, staff and planning and the law department, have provided some input as well. But tonight is really hearing about what you guys think about this, and it's just the start of a process. After it leaves the Landmark Commission, and that won't likely happen tonight, but maybe at the next meeting after some tweaking, then there's a whole process before the council for consideration of adoption. There will be public meetings and conversations about that. So tonight is not a piece of legislation. It's a draft of changes to the code. And, you know, our department, the Planning and Development Department, probably a lot of you associated with things like Top of the Hill or Cedar Lee Meadowbrook, but actually we really get involved in all aspects, you know, the past, the present, and the future. And, you know, making sure our past is honored and preserved, giving opportunities in the present for current homeowners who want to improve their homes, and then looking towards the future with new initiatives and new development. And so there's a balance between that, right? You can't have all one time horizon. It has to be a balance. That's what makes Cleveland Heights great. And that balance is not just across time, but also across roles. And you know, so there's a balance between what the government should be involved with and what private property owners have the right to do. And so I think that's a big part of what these changes are looking to find that balance between is, you know, how should the government get involved through regulation ordinances, and where should the government not be involved? Just a note, so we are keeping everybody on mute right now. There is a microphone right here just for the people in the room, so you don't need to grab a microphone. It captures everybody. But what we'll do is after we have the people in the room comment, then we'll open it up to the folks on the meeting, and you'll just, if you could use one of the react buttons, you know, the wavy hand one, and we can call on you then. And again, this will be recorded and posted, and there'll be opportunity to provide comment going forward. So with that, I think we're going to turn it to Wendy and Diana, and I will bring up your presentation.
Great. Just as a point of order, if you do want to speak publicly and you're in the room, you need to make sure you have signed it, correct?
Signed it.
Yeah. Okay. Now.
Now we're all good. Well, just to start by introducing ourselves, I'm Wendy Naylor. This is Diana Wellman. We're with the firm of Naylor Wellman Historic Preservation Consulting. And it's really been our pleasure to work with the Cleveland Heights Landmarks Commission. This has been the second project we've worked with them on. We worked with them on the design guidelines, now the landmark ordinance. And I really think they're probably the most engaged group that we've had. So it's really been our pleasure. We've tried to get their input, and we're really looking forward to input from all of you. And thank you all very much for coming and attending this evening. So with that, Eric is going to put my presentation on the screen. What we're doing tonight is we're putting a concise PowerPoint together to summarize the landmark ordinance. We'll go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then after that, you know, take some notes if you have some questions, and then please, we'd be happy to answer any questions that come across. If I stand in front of the room, does the camera see me?
All right. If you stand here, you're okay.
I'll just sit here. Okay.
I also printed it out.
Oh,
If
thank
wanna
you so
use
much.
that, you can use
Well,
it,
I can see. Okay,
depending on how far away it is.
So Maisie and I did not coordinate on our presentations. So this is, again, just a quick summary of where the Landmarks Commission has been and where they are now. Founded in 1973, certified local government in 2019, which really brought the Landmark Commission in alliance with state and federal standards for designation and historic design review using the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, which are really the historic preservation best practice of design standards. Design guidelines were 2021, and of course here we are at 2024 doing the update to the Landmark Commission ordinance. So we started by setting goals of what the update was going to accomplish. The goals included really a big focus on clarity, conciseness, alignment with the Secretary of Interior standards. You know, this happens with many ordinances over time. They're amended from time to time, and then you get, you know, different styles of writing or different definitions that come across. So this was a real opportunity for us to look at the ordinance as a whole and make it concise, clear, work on the definitions, and we spent a lot of time doing that. This is also going to be in alignment with the historic preservation design guidelines that were recently adopted. We looked at for compliance with property rights law. We looked over the process for landmark designation and design review, made some changes there. We looked at design or designation criteria and really tried to look at if they were broad enough to include architectural significance, historic significance, cultural significance, to identify landmarks that are equitable and inclusive in Cleveland Heights. We looked at the approval criteria for property owner initiated changes in the exterior of the landmarks, and in places where just in a few landmark designations that are back from 1970, some of them even include a few interior features. So I don't think that'll be as much of the designation process going forward, but we incorporated that because it's part of the designations that are already part of the record in Cleveland Heights. We looked at the criteria for the certificate of appropriateness applications, focused on timelines, spent time looking at demolition, owner provisions, and we created an appeals process. And then finally, we've had one public meeting. We've also, as part of the process and the grant that this is part of, the State Preservation Office has done one review of the draft, and we've also had review and input from the law director. And then again tonight, we're looking for more public input on the process. So those were the goals that we kind of stayed with us as we went through the process. So the Landmark Commission is composed of 7 members. The members are appointed by council and basically have demonstrated special interest, experience, or knowledge in architecture, history, historic preservation, law, realty, archaeology, art history, planning, or really related disciplines. Landmark commissions, to be effective, you really do have to have expertise in the area of historic preservation, applying the Secretary of Interior standards and doing design review and landmark designation. As part of our review this round, we added 2 alternate members. That allows for the situation where you don't want to have to cancel a meeting because there's not a quorum. So that was new to the review that we did this time. Or I believe it was 3 alternate members, pardon me. Powers and duties, that there's an obligation to continue to survey Cleveland Heights properties. They're designating landmarks. They're making determinations on certificates of appropriateness. They're working to continue generally education of residents on historic and architectural heritage of the city. They've accomplished this goal of adopting design guidelines. They act in an advisory role to other officials at the City of Cleveland Heights and departments related to landmarks. Again, there's a level of expertise that really comes from serving on the Landmark Commission. They act as a liaison on behalf of the City of Cleveland Heights to individuals and organizations that are focused on historic preservation. Ken is very much in the role of the Cleveland Heights Historical Society. And also they're obligated to try to attend educational sessions annually. And finally, to do, I don't know if this is started or not, confer a recognition upon owners of landmarks in the City of Cleveland Heights. So that's basically the powers and duties of the commission. The purpose of the Landmark Commission is to designate landmarks in the City of Cleveland Heights in order to preserve, protect, and perpetuate districts, sites, buildings, structures, and objects. So those are generally what we brought into the category of property. That was one of the definitions we looked at so that we didn't have to repeat that. But those are the types of property that are eligible for designation. And you have examples of all of those in your current landmark designation. and opportunity going forward is there to continue with that. And basically, there's a general clause that's very important to the ordinances of Cleveland Heights because it's recognizing the importance of historic preservation to Cleveland Heights, to safeguard the heritage of the city, to stabilize and improve property values, to protect and enhance the city's heritage, make it attractive to residents, tourists, visitors, to enhance the visual and aesthetic character of the city, to foster civic pride in the beauty of the city and accomplishments of the past, to promote the use of preservation of property for education and general welfare of the people of the city, and really to safeguard the architectural integrity of the city's designated landmarks. City of Cleveland Heights is really in a wonderful position where they have so much historic architecture, much of which has already been designated to the National Register, which in a minute I will talk about is very different from local designation. One of the clauses we added to this section was the Landmark Commission, by encouraging preservation, was promoting environmental sustainability through historic preservation and adaptive reuse of historic properties. Recently, there's been more talk of that with historic preservation. You know, all of us spend time recycling our bottles and our cans. Well, recycling buildings makes a huge impact, and there's now a move in historic preservation towards promoting the environmental sustainability of historic preservation. Another part of the purpose is to seek alternatives to demolition and incompatible alterations to landmarks, and to encourage the development of vacant landmark properties in accordance with neighborhood character. So what is a landmark? So landmark properties include individual properties within a historic district, or they can be individual landmark properties. I talked a minute ago about what those types of properties are. When they're designated to local landmark status, they come under local landmark review. I mentioned at the National Register, there are many National Register historic districts in the city of Cleveland Heights, but just because they're listed on the National Register does not make them have to, or does not bring them into historic design review in the city. Listing on the National Register does not place any additional local, state, or federal design review requirements on a property owner, and National Register listing does not automatically invoke landmark designation. I put this will be posted on the city's website, but there's a link there as well, that there's a really wonderful book that's been put together. You can see it to the right, that has photos and a brief history of all the landmarks of the city of Cleveland Heights. So if you're interested, that's a really great resource. The general criteria for landmark designation, generally, there are a variety of criteria that the Landmark Commission reviews, basically related to, is there an important person who would resided in the building? Is there distinguishing characteristic or architectural style of the building or method of construction? Is it the work or an architect? Or does it demonstrate a broad pattern in the development, heritage, or cultural history of Cleveland Heights on the local level? The process for designation. So the process can be initiated by really anyone, an individual, a group, or organization. There's a landmark nomination form available at the city. Once that landmark nomination form has been filled out, it comes back into the planning department at the city, and a written notice will be sent by mail to the owners of a proposed landmark designation. So if an individual wants to do that nomination, or a homeowner and want to have your property landmarked, you may initiate that, or the Landmark Commission maybe do it, the Historical Society could do it. So written notice sent to the owners by mail. And then the commission will handle or will schedule a first public meeting on the question of the designation, providing, again, public notice, and will provide an opportunity for anyone to express their opinion about the designation. Once that public hearing is complete, the next step is the commission will prepare a report and a recommendation on the designation. So we spent time talking about what should be included in that report. We very much tried to follow the National Register process, but do it at a local level because it's again, we're trying to stick with accepted practices in historic preservation. So the things that will be included are photographic documentation, a map and site plan, physical description, history, statement of significance, integrity, and for historic districts, a list of the contributing and non-contributing properties. Contributing property is one that contributes to the significance of the district. Non-contributing does not. In many cases, that's a property that might have been built more recently, maybe the 1980s or 90s. Then the Landmark Commission will next make a recommendation based on that report of a designation. And if they decline to recommend a designation, the process ends at that point. So the next step is there's another public hearing to present the report. And again, an opportunity is provided for the public to express their opinion. After that hearing, 60 days, and a decision is made by the commission. So that was the designation process. And once a landmark is designated, it is now brought into historic design review whenever there are any property changes, exterior alterations, new construction, demolition, or moving, if the property is moved to another location, it is now required to come before the Landmark Commission who reviews it, applying design criteria, and their decision is based on the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. It's different than maintenance repair, which is distinguished as really a process of conserving and fixing a building. That does not have to come in to design review. For more detail on the historic design review process, these are the front cover of the historic preservation design guidelines. There's a lot of detail about the certificate of appropriateness, the process, different examples of, site design, additions, new construction, and again, we've put that resource out there for you. So I just have a few slides left that talk about things that we spent time on that are newer to the updated ordinance. We added a section on proximity, which is for the purpose of determining compatibility to design review. The potential for one property by virtue of its location to materially and adversely affect a landmark property, that will be called into review by the Landmark Commission and issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. The property will also be reviewed by the Architecture Review Board, but it is allowing the Landmark Commission to render an opinion about properties that are immediately adjacent to a landmark or immediately opposite a landmark property. If there's a demolition, if there's a change going on, it allows them to render an opinion through a certificate of appropriateness on the impact of that change. Demolition, we spent some time on that. Generally, demolition that is ordered for emergency purposes is not subject to the Landmark Commission. Where this comes in is if an owner wants to demolish a property, there are certain criteria that they have to meet before that demolition is to take place. So if the owner wants to demolish a landmark property, the standard that they are required to meet is to repair or rehabilitation of the property if it is not economically feasible and the property's condition did not result from damage, which was purposely caused to the property or allowed to occur due to the negligence of the owner. That is the standard by which they have to meet in order to demolish a landmark. And in addition, they need to show plans for the property that they plan, the building that they plan to build on the property after the demolition. So these are clauses that are used in different communities for demolition, where they've been threatened with demolition of landmarks. They've been very effective for saving landmark buildings from demolition. Let me see what, and then there's some other criteria for demolition. If there's an addition that's incompatible, that's under a separate clause for that. Also, if there's a pending landmark application, no property may be demolished during the pendency of a landmark designation application. And then finally, at the end, there's a stay of 30 days after a demolition is ordered. It just allows a little cooling off period. So we spent a lot of time focusing on demolition criteria, which is a change to this ordinance. And if you've got questions about that, we'd be happy to address them. Finally, we added an appeal section at the recommendation of the law director, which basically allows an appeal within 10 days of an action by the Landmark Commission. A public hearing is held with notice, and the appeal is held by counsel. And if the person still wants to continue to appeal, there's the opportunity to do the common pleas court. So just reviewing the project schedule, we started this project process in October. We've had long internal meetings. It's a lot to go through ordinances. We mentioned we had a public meeting in December. This is the second public meeting. The goal is to come up with a final draft to deliver to SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, where their final review is coming up. And April 15th is when we're hoping to have the final draft in place, which the board will continue with to take to council. So I appreciate your patience. It's a lot of information, but we're very happy to address any questions that you might have.
How do we want to do that?
I think we could just have folks raise their hand and we can just call on each of them and maybe easy if you want to be our moderator, but I
Sure.
just see a hand.
Do you want us to come up there?
You don't have to.
Sit here.
You can stand, you can sit. I think just make sure you say your name before you do your comment. So
if people can hear me, I'll sit, but if not, I'll stand.
go ahead.
My name is Barbara Hawley, and I live on the Landon Drive in Cleveland Heights. I did read through the proposed ordinance over the weekend, and I would like to read it more carefully, but when I read it, there were certain things that jumped out at me that I would like to ask about. The first thing that jumped out at me is that our existing ordinance requires the consent of a property owner to the designation of the owner's property as a landmark, and that is clearly not in the new ordinance. And the existing ordinance also says that if a district is going to be designated, that I think it's phrased as more than 50% of the owners of property in the district must consent to the designation of the historic district, with each property or parcel being a vote. So I have many questions, but I'll try to just ask three. So that's my first question is, what is the thinking of the commission in removing that provision?
What's interesting about it, do you mind if I
Go for it.
What's interesting about historic preservation ordinances, many people go, well, show us the perfect historic preservation ordinance. And they're tailored. What happens is they end up being tailored to the communities. So some communities very much want the owner consent provisions. Other communities have moved, some of your neighboring communities like Shaker Heights, the city of Cleveland, have moved to owner notification, which satisfies property rights laws, where an effort is strongly made to reach out and notify the prospective designee that there is, it's an upcoming designation. But it really is the choice of the community, what direction they would like to go. So.
Well, I think I would say, I mean, we live in a neighborhood for which there was an attempt to make us a historic district. This was in 2019, and different people reacted to it differently. I would say that a significant problem at the time, at least from my perspective, I think it was shared by many people, was that the process was quite flawed in that there was no prior notice. The declaration was made at a meeting of the commission in which it wasn't even on the agenda.
So I'm gonna just jump in on that, because that's actually, it's that effort that happened in 2019, that process, we learned from that process.
Okay.
And that was really one of the guiding forces in moving forward, was that we wanted to make sure it was very clear what all the steps were. It was very clear what the expectations were. There were so many questions that came forward during that it was obvious that we had to do our homework and get everything cleared up and make sure that there was a process for input from the public and so.
And I appreciate that, because I see that in the orders that you would not be able to make either a temporary or permanent designation of the district without all of.
Can you talk louder?
Oh, yeah, maybe I'll just stand up. I would say that I did see that in the new ordinances, that there's a substantial due process before you make the decision. I thought that was very positive. But I think that, and I think this is something that people can provide input to you as you consider changes to the draft. I would say that in our neighborhood, there, I think, is a very strong desire to have property owners have a right to consent to this process, and certainly for a district to at least have a majority. I don't think anyone would expect it to be unanimous. But so that was one issue.
Can I just piggyback on that? So we did add a provision that if 2/3 of owners wrote a letter saying they do not want to be listed, it will not be listed.
Well, I read that, but that's after it's been designated a district. That's in the section that talks about how you get your property out of a district, but it's not a factor in the original formation of the district, as I read this. Another question I have is, I noted that you have a new definition called alter or alteration, which is not in the existing law. And I thought initially I was sort of excited by that because, again, I think one of the concerns back in 2019 was that once we became part of the district, that even the most insignificant activity on our property was going to have to be reviewed by the commission, a change of paint. I mean, so this looked like a big improvement because it talked about that being a change to the exterior requiring a building permit. But then I didn't see that term carried through the rest of the ordinance, unless what you meant, and maybe this is the answer, the word change is described as an alteration and different things. And I guess, and I'm a retired lawyer, I don't practice anymore, but as a lawyer, typically if you create a defined term and it's capitalized, then when you mean it to apply, you capitalize it. So I think if that's what you mean, when you define change, alteration should be capitalized. And I think that's a good thing, because then I read that to mean that not every minor thing has to come before the commission, but rather only significant things that would otherwise require a building permit. I think that would be very well received, at least it did by me, and I think it would be by many people.
That hasn't changed from the previous ordinance of what would be and the tradition of what has happened is what would require a certificate of appropriateness. It was not something like paint color change or hardware change or something like that. It was major change, and so part of that process was clarifying, but I think we can certainly relook at that to make sure that that's.
And the
even more-
design guidelines also lay out what is required for a building permit versus what is just general repair and maintenance. So that has, the guidelines tried to correct some of that back in.
Okay, and I haven't read those,
Sure,
so,
sure. But this is really great.
the other thing that concerned me, and again, I think in your presentation, you had provided a helpful suggestion there, and that was that I read the appeal section to only apply to, what do you call these certificates that you get when you want to?
Appropriateness. Yeah.
Yes, it's written so that you're only appealing a certificate of appropriateness. And I think it's very important that the initial determination to put property into a historic district or to designate an individual property as a landmark, I think it's very important that that be something that a property owner could take to city council, where there would be elected officials who would hear the appeal. So I guess that section is one that was unclear to me until tonight. And I would like to see, as a property owner, I'd like to see that brought. I have other questions too, which I would just submit a letter, but those are the big issues to me that jumped out to me.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next? Sure. Come on up. And make sure you say your name.
Stephen Robbins, on Devonshire Drive in Angler Heights, on a real estate, general estate. Members of the Landmark Commission may remember me and my wife from 5 years ago. We were the main target of your emergency declaration of Angler Heights as an historic district, which for some reason you decided to victimize our whole neighborhood and not just us, with the specific intention of stopping us from replacing a declining older house with a modern replacement. An action that I point out that was defeated by a vote of more than 90% of Angler Heights homeowners. You will have no knowledge about this. We want to go on record against the changes you're suggesting. We see changes that are not necessary at all for problems that don't exist. No property owner in Cleveland Heights should have his or her rights constrained by a volunteer unelected committee. And I realize you have a prejudice right off the bat. You're chosen because you value preservation. Your title of your business, historic preservation, tells us where you're coming from. And I just point out that everything old isn't worth preserving. And there are not a lot of people who want to spend $500,000 on fixing up a house. We don't have a lot of people like that. I happen to be one of those crazy people who wanted to spend millions of dollars to stay at Cleveland Heights. Most people don't want to do that. I think we've demonstrated, my wife and I, that a new home can enhance the appearance and tax base of Angler Heights. A vital and thriving community must be receptive to change in order to continue thriving. And if Cleveland Heights is going to increase its tax base, if we're going to be vital, we have to be responsive to demolishing some of these older homes and spending and allowing people the freedom to make some of these changes. I just don't understand why you're initiating changes when we went through all of this 5 years ago. It was very clear that the Landmark Commission acted in ways that never should have been. They never should have acted to try to take rights away from homeowners. And we're still feeling the burn of that. And I wanted to express that you know nothing much about this. They know all about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Make sure you say your name.
I'm Kenneth Metzen, 2207 Devonshire Drive, and I want to give a different viewpoint of what he has. I spoke with this part of this committee when they wanted to tear down the house. I had been in that house many times for parties, and it was a lovely home. I don't think it was a tear-down house, frankly. But what I was most concerned about was not that he wanted to build him out of the house. My spouse at the time, who is now dead, wanted to build a contemporary house. That wasn't the issue. The issue for me was health reasons. When the Nitsons tore down their house, when Judson Park tore down a whole hospital wing, when my next door neighbors in the back put in an extensive garden in the back and were there cutting stone as the Nissons were, and the Nesters did extensive work tearing down a house. And we were right in the middle of all of that. And it had a disastrous effect on your health. I talked about violent nosebleeds that went on from 8 in the evening till 4 in the morning. They come in to clean up the room and said, "What happened here? Were you in an automobile accident?" No. I had sinus problems, and those people who have immune deficiencies have got to be protected. On our little street, across the street from his house, there are 3 people who have dementia. My spouse died of dementia. Mike Weil died of dementia. I spoke with Erica Steffi on her birthday, or shortly after, I guess it was. Her sister called and told me that she was near the end. There was an article after he tore down his house in the New York Times. It was a front page story talking about the disastrous effect of particulate matter on the elderly and people with suppressed immune deficiencies. And it was horrible to read. And sure enough, it was accurate. And I don't think, when I've been subjected to about 15 years of constant noise, which contributes to deafness and makes dementia worse, that I should have to go through 2 or 3 more years of that noise and watch my spouse deteriorate. I not only lost my spouse, I lost my dog to cancer. And I want this commission to take into account for the physical aspects of what they're doing. It's not fair. We contributed a lot to the neighborhood to make it beautiful where he'd want to live in it. Erica Steffi and Bill Steffi had a beautiful home. They put a lot of money into it. He left the home to her to enjoy her later years. She didn't get to do it for very long. And it makes me very angry. When the Nitsons were tearing down their house, there were plumes of particulate matter going up 30 feet in the air and on downwind of them right across the street, and it's blowing in. My windows are open because I'm not one of the real rich people who has air conditioning in every room. I have a long-haired dog who needs to breathe. The phone rings while I'm cooking. Ron's in the pantry loading the dishwasher. And it's starting to become dusk. And I looked over to him to tell him to answer the phone. And what I saw was just horrifying. All I saw was something like the densest fog in Big Sur country with zillions of particles flying around like crazy. And every time there was a little gentle breeze through the screen, about a half a cup of dirt comes into the house. That filters all around the house. Every time I had to clean the house, every single room was a major project. And that goes on for a couple of years. And it's not fair. Not year after year after year. Spread them out elsewhere. They didn't have to build the house there. They could have taken another location with a better view. But they wanted to be there. They have the right to be there if they want to be there, but you've got to think of the consequences of what it's done to us. I'm going to go home tonight to an empty house with no spouse, with no dog, and I'm not happy about it. And when I got up and talked about my bloody nose, where they stuck toothpicks up nearly into my brain and inflated them, the response from one of my neighbors was, Laura won't let that happen. She'll make sure that they use water when they cut the stone. Well, it did happen a number of times. And I've been back twice when they were building their house or shortly after. One of the times, when I went in at 8 o'clock, procedure in the emergency room is that they have to go through a series of protocol before they can call in a specialist, ear, nose, and throat specialist. So I bled from 8 in the evening until 1 o'clock before they could get a specialist to come in. And he said, well, I'm going to have to go way up in your nostrils to do this, and I'm going to have to anesthetize you. Put spray up, and what it did was paralyze my throat. And he worked for 2.5 hours up there. Well, I couldn't talk, hardly breathe. Only breathing I got was through my nostrils while he was working. And then, after I had, at the last meeting, talked about the first nosebleed, one of my gallant neighbors came to Laura's rescue and said, let's take out a petition. We all want this. We love Laura and Steve. I like them too. I just don't like what they did. A year later, after they finished, I went to my ear, nose, and throat specialist. He said, your nostrils look much better. You're not going to have to come in every 6 months now. Just come in once a year. And I said, well, you know, there's a reason why it looks better. I said, I haven't been exposed to constant particulate matter in the air with all these projects. And he says, you know, I've been doing a lot of research since the Canadian fires. And he says, what you were breathing is 10 times worse than the Canadian fires. Our neighborhood is not a condominium association. I resented Sal's circulating a petition to let these people think that 90% of the people were in favor of what they're doing. That is not a fact.
I don't have a question, but will you take comments?
Yes.
Okay, so I also would like to spend some more time reading it, like you said.
My
name is Colin Compton. I'm on East Fairfax. I would also like to spend some more time reading the ordinance, but the part that I was pleased to see and to see represented here was the protections and review process for designated properties if the owner wants to demolish them. I think that that's been missing, and I was just pleased to see those included.
Yes.
I have a question. I had previewed all the information.
Can you say your name and your?
But I didn't see anything. Oh, I'm sorry. Bob Graham on Stratford Road. Question. If somebody buys a previously designated property, but they want to renovate it, they're prevented from doing that kind of thing if it's designated. Can they remove the house off the registry for Cleveland Heights?
There is a process for removing
So you can,
property.
okay. I just wanted to know. Okay.
But I think we need to be clear that you're not prevented from doing renovations. It's not a preventative. It's just if there's a permit that needs pulled for an exterior, it's a review, but there's lots of renovations that fit within the certificate of appropriateness. Even like windows could be totally replaced. It's just what are you replacing?
Oh, sure.
So I just want to make it clear, it's not like we're trying to
I'm talking about like additions and, you know, that kind of thing. That would change the look of the house.
Even additions can be approved. They just have to be architecturally appropriate for the land.
But just to clarify, I don't think you automatically remove a property from the landmark designation simply because the property owner requests it. Isn't there a criteria?
There's a process.
You could decide that the criteria are not met and the property must remain a landmark. So
correct.
It's not it's not a voluntary thing.
I have a question. If I didn't get along with my neighbor and I thought, you know what, I'm going to fill out an application and have their house identified as a landmark.
So I'm gonna, I appreciate the comments, but I think that we should not be relitigating some neighborhood issues.
No, I'm just clarifying. You went down your list and you said that
If there's a pending application that is a completed application for a landmark designation, then there's a hold during that period until designation is determined.
And what could that person do? Can that person say, I want to stop this? The person whose home has been identified as a potential landmark home. Could that person?
They are notified that the process is going on and invited to come to the public hearing.
They have
about
to
the
stop
process.
it. They can't say, no, I don't want this to happen to me.
Yes, can you say your name and your address, please?
Yes, my name is Mary Rose Antiari. I live in Coventry Village. Previously, I lived in on Derbyshire, next to the officer. I'm really appreciative that you are revising landmarks ordinance and that so much effort is being put into it. I think that some of the issues that were brought up are going to need to be the focus of other contexts in which council and other commissions can address. Obviously, there's a need for the building department to be able to enforce proper site protections and environmental administrations. there is a need for better aging in place resources. And I could tell like everyone in the room that there were strong feelings and a certain fear of property rights being challenged. My point of view is that designating neighborhood as a historic district or a property as a historic landmark is not a dirty trick that someone is playing on the owner. It's a recognition, and it's a way of.
It's a dirty trick.
Well, yes, well, we have to discuss what our values are as a community, and some of us see it as a detriment, and some of us see it as a privilege. We have to the extent to which we want to live together and to be a prosperous community together, we have to agree on some common shared values, and I hope we can do that. One of the main reasons why I enjoyed moving to Cleveland Heights was its historic character. Like I really liked it, and of course, anybody likes to have impeccable interior in their house and brand new everything, but we have to find a balance so that as our building stock gets improved and renewed, we don't lose the character that makes it a desirable place to live. And I found it very regrettable that the first attempt at designating a historic district in Ambler Heights, which I think that most of Cleveland Heights residents consider Ambler Heights a jewel of our city. It's a beautiful neighborhood, and of course, if every single house would get demolished, it would not be so desirable. I understand that there's a corner of Ambler Heights that gets to pay city of Cleveland taxes, and that's some kind of appeal, and then it has a beautiful view and a few properties are on the cliff, and that's another appeal. But overall, it would not be the crown jewel of Cleveland Heights if everybody would demolish the house and put a new one. So it has to be handled case by case. From what I understand from the member of the Landmark Commission who spoke, there was a lot of contrition and regret that that was not managed properly, and some of these revisions are meant to straighten things out and to make sure that owners are heard. And I, for one, would like to see some of the historic aspects of neighborhoods come up in the architectural board of review, not just when a property ends up in the Landmarks Commission. I would like to see guidelines that even if a substantial renovation takes place in a neighborhood, compatibility with the surrounding properties is taken into account. Across of my old condo on Derbyshire, a couple of houses were seriously renovated. It looked like someone put a lot of money and sold them, and good for them. But in the process, they made some changes to the facades that don't really belong in that neighborhood. The kind of situation when you put flagstone just on the street elevation, complete change of finishes on the side. It looks like it belongs in a suburb, in a brand new suburb, not in an old suburb like ours. I was disappointed that the Architectural Board of Review did not keep in mind the historic character of the neighborhood. And my hope is that in the future guidelines for historic neighborhoods would be also added to the landmarks ordinance. And I hope that this opportunity to engage with the public is going to help you fine-tune the document. But from my point of view, I see it as an improvement to the tools that the city of Cleveland Heights has to preserve and enhance our building stock. So,
yes, in the back.
Oh, there's also people on the side too.
Oh, okay, okay. Go ahead, you can go.
Oh, okay. My name is Franny Mentor, I live on Chelsea Drive. Although I'm a trustee in Forest Hill Homeowners Association, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking on my own about some issues that have come up. It kind of piggybacks on what people were saying. And what we have had is a problem with any kind of enforcement. We have, although many people are not familiar with our area, we have a lot of beautiful slate roofs and the old tile roofs, very expensive tile roofs that you wouldn't put on a house today, and even if you were more familiar, probably. And there's an effort to preserve them. When we have gone, and I'm aware of these situations, there seems to be a problem, kind of a culture of fear or something, with the administration that there's very little or no enforcement. For example, there was a home that I forget if this one was purchased by an LLC, Altown LLC or not, but they began to tear off the roof. And this happens frequently on a weekend, sometimes on a holiday weekend, so they can come in, there's nobody in City Hall to enforce stop work order. And on this particular occasion, because there was no permit, the city did come out and issue a stop work order. However, since then, the owner of that home ignored that, replaced the roof with a cheaper asphalt product, not just a cheaper product, but one of the cheaper versions of an asphalt product. And nothing that we're aware of has happened. I was involved in another case where a home that was purchased, this was purchased by definitely, probably a nationwide investor, but he replaced all the windows if they were not compatible with the architecture and tore off the roof and again put on a really cheap version. And he did not file for a permit, nor did he go before the ABR. They eventually were brought before the ABR, but no, that I'm aware of, nothing was done to this individual who owns, I don't know how many homes.
So were those buildings current landmarks, or?
They were not. However, it's appropriate to this conversation because you can bring this forth and pass it, but unless things are enforced on a level, the local level, it won't bring about any change. We would like to have our neighborhood turned into a landmark, primarily because of roofs. But if there is no enforcement, even by the time we do that, the quality is gone. So that's how it's connected. And I would think that the Landmark Commission and the Historical Society will be concerned about this lack of enforcement, because it's death by 1,000 cuts.
So I will, when landmark properties, including, of which there are no districts right now, but they do have to go through the process of being reviewed by the Landmark Commission. It's an extra layer of protection for properties like that. It is founded on people following the appropriate steps that they need to go through with things like that. And so I think we have talked about, and there are efforts among the city, from what I understand, to try and make sure that those things get tightened up a little bit. But that is outside of our Landmark Commission's purview.
I understand and I appreciate that. I'm just saying that even if you have, no matter what you put on the book, if it's not enforced.
Correct.
The last thing I'd like to mention is that, again, in enforcing and maintaining standards, well, as long as there's anything left to really maintain, which is questionable, the ABR, when they review these, people do follow the permitting process and do come before the ABR, they have issued permits for homes in which the person has gotten one estimate. They want to rip off their slate roof, they've gotten one estimate. And they've made a decision based on that. And this may be of interest to the people in the room, but the city of Cleveland Heights had purchased a relationship, basically, obviously Margaret can speak to this, with the Cleveland Restoration Society. They will send out for free, you will get free technical assistance. They will come and look at your roof and say, yes, it's got to go, or no, it requires very little repair. They could at least render a free second opinion. So there is no burden on that homeowner to purchase a second opinion. So this is the kind of standards that they have to be enforced on the lower level, or there really will be, you know, people begin, the word is really out there, I think, with these LLCs, with the word paper tiger. You know, do whatever you want, because once it's gone, it's gone. And again, I really feel there should be some enforcement from the point of view of the city. You know, you would think that there'd be some relationship between permitting, lack of permitting, and the law department. They would follow up on this. At least they could get some revenue out of people who are breaking the rules. Thank you. Also, I want to extend my empathy to you, sir. I feel sorry for you. I'm sure many people in the room, you go home, you know, by yourself. And also, how did your house, did they let you finally tear it down? I know you're.
Yeah.
So you did tear it down and go to a new house?
Okay, we're gonna.
No, I just wondered, he was concerned, he didn't like the rules.
We can
But you heard?
talk about that afterwards. Okay, other comments or questions about the ordinance proposed changes? On the screen,
Oh, yeah, this guy,
You've been waving.
you can wave it.
Sorry about that.
There he is.
Thank you. I didn't know if anyone was looking at the screen. Thank you. Michael Bennett. I now live on Denton in the Amboy Heights neighborhood, but I was not there during the last dispute. However, for 33 years, I owned a 1912 bungalow in Coventry, so I certainly know about historic houses in Cleveland Heights. I want to come back to actually Barbara's first question, which I didn't really hear enough of an answer for, about the decision in the proposed ordinance to require, to not allow for owners to just notify owners instead of require owners' consent. I'm curious really about the thought process, this being Cleveland Heights, where I know there's always a touchy balance between individual rights and states' rights. I get that. But in a place that we nicknamed ourselves the People's Republic of Cleveland Heights, even before I boomeranged back here 35 years ago, I'm curious of the thinking of the commission in suggesting that owners would only be notified and not require their consent. What was the thought process? What was the discussion like? And I heard the answer before that communities do it different ways based on the tenor of the community, and why you thought in this community it was sufficient to not require consent by owners. Thank you. Well, by the way, great work on the rest of the ordinance. I'm all for historic preservation. I love it. That's why I re-upped in Cleveland Heights. We had an opportunity to move out a few years ago, and we made our realtor work extra hard so we could stay in the Heights. So I think you're doing a great job, but I am curious about the thinking and the reasoning and that, and if you'd be open to revising that recommendation before it goes to council. Thank you.
So part of our process was to look at the ordinances in the area around us, immediately around us. So we looked at Shaker Heights because that is a compatible, very similar community. We looked at the city of Cleveland particularly. We also looked all around, but we looked especially at those two to model what revisions we would be doing. We also looked at the standards across the country on preservation and local landmark ordinances. So we were using those as models and guidelines for what we did. There was, when we talk about property rights, and this is the part I will not be able to say correctly, so I'm looking at you guys, but there was a case, 1978.
You were talking about owner notification versus owner consent.
Correct.
Due process. And due process requires notice and opportunity to be heard by a neutral reviewer. And notification complies with that. I mean, Penn Central versus the New York City Landmarks Commission was the case that really determined that landmarks commissions had the authority to do designations of buildings and protect them aesthetically. So the owner notification satisfies due process, as does owner consent.
But all the proposed changes, what we're doing today is taking in comments and concerns. So we are listening.
Well, just to follow up, I get that it complies with the law, obviously, or you wouldn't propose it, but that doesn't mean you couldn't have done it differently. And why, given in a highly individualistic community like Cleveland Heights that still works together as a community, you wouldn't consider, maybe you did consider and aren't sharing, not requiring consent. I mean, not why you didn't change it the other way so that owners would have the opportunity to consent.
Well, I think I will just put it out there that our goal, and we have been charged by the city of Cleveland Heights to preserve landmark structures. And so the strongest way to do that is in the ways and the changes that we have proposed in this. And that is our mission given to us by the city of Cleveland Heights. So that's what our goal is. So what we propose, that may not be what ends up coming out of city council after it goes through that process.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, following up on that, why you felt this was necessary? Why go through this expensive process to look at this? What made you re-look at what was already written?
So the process that we engaged with grew out of what happened in 2019. In the idea, we knew at the time in 2019 that to follow state standards so that our city could be a certified local government, which opens up opportunities for investment and projects that can happen like the College Club and Stadium Square, whatever it's also called, Taylor Tudor, that there were things that we needed to improve upon. So that happened in 2019. But we knew even then that there were going to be additional things that we should strive for. And then also the process with what happened with Ambler Heights was a learning moment for us. So we have gone through this process very thoughtfully on accepting what was told to us. We created the design guidelines, all of that. So this is not just something also that's happening with landmarks, but it is happening across the city with ordinances and regulations and things like that. So we are not a standalone project within the city. Yes, go ahead.
I'm Katarina McGregor. I live on the corner of South Overlook and North Park. I'm not sure if our house officially belongs in Ambler Heights, but probably it is a house of historical value for many reasons. What troubles me about the potential designation of my house, either individually or as part of the Ambler Heights, is if you were to walk down my street on any day, you would see trash receptacles that are open. They're left pretty much the entirety of the week. Trash strewn about, very uneven sidewalks. We've had, I would say for over 6 months, a big gaping hole that today they finally started work on. I realize that these are different departments within the city, but it feels to me as though it would be an additional burden to me. We had a fire 5 years ago. We needed a new window as a result of a fire. It took 2 months, not for a designated house, but just for the city to give us permission to replace the window. Sorry, didn't realize this was going to be emotional. Recently, the city, I guess, walked up and down the street and determined who needed to paint their house versus replace their sidewalk. Already that feels like quite an imposition when other houses down the street are a disaster. So it's difficult to me to come to this experience as a person who feels as though a right as a homeowner is being taken away from me without my consent. And I do understand the balance of, having our neighborhood designation versus my right within my home and my property. My question is, what is the benefit to the homeowner to have this designation, financial or otherwise?
So there have been, and I'm going to have you jump in and any of the commission members. I think there are a number of benefits. Obviously, we think there are a number of benefits, but there are also economic benefits. So when we look at property values and compare and contrast with designated and not designated, generally speaking, the designated property values are higher and they will improve over time. It helps stabilize the values in a community. So when we're looking at economics along those that lines, one thing I will address is your concern over the timing. So our goal, like if there's a project, like something like a fire, which is devastating, and I'm sorry you don't have to go through that. Our goal as a commission and how we have functioned throughout this with our current landmark properties is we are working together with you to identify the best possible solution to what you have. And that is not always the highest level of preservation solution. That's what's going to work in the situation that you're in, and we will work with you. And that includes timing. We have worked together where we meet in a joint session with ABR so that you are coming to one meeting instead of multiple meetings. We work with staff. So those kind of things, our goal is for the best best possible outcome for everyone, for the community, for the property owner. So that is what we work with, is trying to work together with you on that.
So historic districts are often attractive to not just commercial developers, but people wanting to buy homes because there's a predictability in the district of the type of construction and the appearance of the district, because there is design review for everyone in that district that wants to make changes for the building. So many people are attracted to a district for that reason.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I mean, I can say,
on the commission, I mean.
Sorry, I can say, I work for the Cleveland Restoration Society, and one of our programs is our Heritage Home Program. It's 32 years old this year. When we first started that program, it was on Franklin Boulevard on the near west side in Cleveland. One of the earlier historic districts there, where they were losing a lot of homes due to disinvestment and demolition. And because the city created a local district, and because there was a tool for people to rehab these older homes, it's now, and it took a long time, but it's now a really popular area with very high property values. And so doing that type of local district, because it creates that stability, predictability, and people, whether they recognize it or not, are often drawn toward places with historic character. It can become help stabilize a neighborhood and make it a really appealing place to live with strong property values.
In addition to, just one more comment, if you have a commercial building that's within a CLG designated district, it makes that property owner eligible for the Ohio Historic State Tax Credits, which is up to 25% of the rehabilitation costs. So there's also another value there.
I'm bringing this up because I recently found out.
I forgot to ask for your name and your, you gave it. I need your name and your, sorry. Your name and your address.
My name is Christine Henny. I live on East Monmouth Road in Cleveland Heights. And I'm just bringing this up because I recently found out that landmark status can be awarded to outside areas like the Bradford, Cinder Path, etc. And this might apply to the role of the Landmark Commission in its enforcement, or whatever you want to say, about these types of outside areas. So I had prepared just something that I'll read quickly, just to get your feedback. So thank you for inviting comments from the Cleveland Heights community. I thought I'd take this opportunity for public questions to address the panel about historic preservation issue that, in my opinion, deserves attention from the Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission, and that is the preservation of historic Horseshoe Lake. The Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission webpage makes the following statement concerning its purpose, which you have already gone over. The purpose of the Landmark Commission is to designate landmarks and historic districts in the city of Cleveland Heights in order to preserve, protect, perpetuate places, buildings, districts, structures, works of art, and other objects having a special historical, community, or aesthetic interest or value. It describes one aim of the Landmark Commission's procedures to seek alternatives to demolition or incompatible alterations to designated landmarks and properties within designated historic districts before such acts are performed. So my question is, why hasn't the Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission advocated for landmark status for Horseshoe Lake? Its mission clearly states its purpose is to identify and protect aesthetic cultural sites within the city. In my view, the relatively recent plans for Horseshoe Lake by the sewer district don't provide an adequate explanation because landmark status could have been established years ago and may help to protect the historic preservation of Horseshoe Lake. This is particularly relevant, as you mentioned, whether or not this is important, but the park is also designated on the National Register of Historic Places within 2 historic districts. Horseshoe Lake Park is recognized as a cherished historic site and is utilized by many Cleveland Heights residents, as well as people from outside the community and all over the country. So landmark status, in my opinion, is appropriately justified. So I'm grateful for the recent landmark status designated to the Bradford Cinder Path as well as King Park, but it seems appropriate that Horseshoe Lake would also qualify for landmark designation as a historic park in our city. Is there currently a way to establish landmark status for Horseshoe Lake? This landmark status could offer additional protection for Horseshoe Lake's preservation, or at least encourage consideration of alternative options that would mitigate serious injury to the integrity of this historic cultural site, and potentially avoid its destruction. Work is not scheduled to begin at Horseshoe Lake until at least 2025, so it appears there is some time to establish landmark status. A Section 106 review process is also required for sites on the National Register of Historical Places and must occur before a permit is issued by the federal agency responsible for the project oversight, which is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And landmark status would provide a benefit for Horseshoe Lake within that regulatory oversight process. So, I bring this up just because, the role of the Landmark Commission and why it has not been involved in this, because it's been frustrating to see it just be given away sort of because the sewer district says so. And I just feel like because of Kane Park, because of the Bradford Cinder Path, it brought to my attention that we could potentially make Horseshoe Lake have landmark status, and that would really help at least consider alterations that would prevent it from being completely destroyed. So anyway, I just bring it up so that it's something you consider and look at maybe the enforcement of the Landmark Commission and what they approach and don't approach based on this, because it does affect luring to the community. Horseshoe Lake is a big draw to people moving here, and it's a cultural asset, and it's also an aesthetic asset. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for the Landmark Commission to consider it. And so I appreciate you letting me bring that up here.
Sure.
And,
so as the ordinance is written now, you need to have owner consent, and there is not owner consent to create a landmark for Horseshoe Lake.
Who is the owner, though?
That part I don't know.
Cleveland, City of Cleveland.
City of Cleveland, correct?
City of Cleveland owns it.
And most of it's actually in Shaker.
In Shaker.
Right, but
That's not relevant because we have, the Garfield Monument.
But that's, Garfield Monument is partial, yes, but it is because there isn't owner consent that we.
It's multi-city is what I mean.
But we could theoretically approach the city of Cleveland and see if they'd be willing
to make a Cleveland Heights landmark. No, that would become a Cleveland landmark.
Well, it gets sticky, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, that's the answer to your question is that we are not involved because it is not a landmark and we cannot make it a landmark.
It seems like there should be maybe some revision so that we can work on trying to do that for future problems like this that have controlled by many different cities so that we don't just let it go because nobody could do anything. Because that's kind of how this has gone, you know, nothing has happened because nobody can do anything. So it's very frustrating, but anyway, okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
My name is David Goodman. I live on Elandon Drive, also in the Ambler Heights neighborhood. And I don't want to belabor any further this question of homeowner or homeowners' consent, but it's obviously a matter of very intense concern to many residents. And I thoroughly believe you all have been acting in good faith and with good intentions, and that you believe you are responding to the ways in which the 2019 effort failed and was thwarted. But when you say you've learned from that, it sounds like what you've learned is that a requirement for homeowner consent can thwart designations, especially if they're viewed as ill-conceived. You might have learned the lesson that even greater concern and attention should be paid to homeowner preferences, either individual or collective in a district. And I appreciate that you've several times cited Shaker Heights and Cleveland as examples where consent is not required. But you haven't indicated what other communities do require consent that many of us might think are equally comparable and equally good or better examples. So if this ordinance as proposed goes to council without some heightened allowance for homeowner consent, I suspect the same concerns will be raised with council, and I hope they would be effective, in which case this commission would twice seem not to have learned the lesson of the importance of homeowner consent, not to thwart everything all the time, but where it is well-founded, as I believe the objections in 2019 in Ambler Heights were. Thank you.
Sorry, I was taking a note. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I didn't want to speak twice. Okay, if there's enough time for it.
There should be enough time, I think.
So again, Marie was on Giuliani, 1856 Padua. It occurred to me in listening to Michael Bennett's comments and yours that we really want to have a tiered approach to this issue of owner consent. What am I thinking of? Most of us, assuming we're homeowners, if we are to land in a situation of being subjected to Landmarks Commission review, chances are it's going to be because our neighborhood becomes a district. The odds of each one of us having our home designated are small. Most houses are part of neighborhoods. And owner consent required for a neighborhood is going to be viewed as a whole, and it's probably not going to be 100%. It's going to be a certain percentage. So I think that we should worry about our own or other people's individual homes being landmarked without full embracing by the owner, separately from commercial or outstanding landmark property. And I think that if we think about it in a tiered manner, we may come to some agreement in spirit. Because, for example, I would like to see a fast-track way of making a local landmark of major properties that are already on the National Trust of Historic Places. I think that because that one required owner consent at the time, and I think that the city of Cleveland Heights would be within reason if, I don't know, Church of the Sacred, some major thing, if we would allow the ordinance changes to allow that kind of designation. I'm also thinking of some buildings that are less fortunate. There's a very old historic church on Superior Road, close to the intersection with Mayfield, that comes across as not belonging to a very wealthy congregation. And if we would have it both a national and a local landmark, the city may be able to save it. It looks like it needs a lot of help. So I'm thinking that maybe we don't feel so strongly about this kind of outstanding property being more lenient or agnostic on owner consent, and then for individual homes, hopefully you can create a whole, opinion within your neighborhood so that you can all go one way or another. I also want to point out that since the first try with Ambler Heights didn't go well, and they seem to still feel quite strongly about it. Maybe you pass the ordinance, maybe you give them some kind of special status, like they're the last ones on the list who are going to be common. Let them have their little reservation there. Let them wait and see. And let's show them how the rest of the city of Cleveland Heights does great with historic districts. And we name these other, perhaps less fortunate neighborhoods that don't sit there with developers queuing to buy their building just to demolish it and build brand new. And I think that once the process gets going and you see the rest of the city prosper on account of this, maybe they will come to feel differently, or maybe they want to be kind of set aside for a longer time. It looks like that's like a difficult neighborhood to do, and they have had that experience of, could you have some kind of clause that for the next, 10 years, they can.
We've already, we're not looking at Ambler Heights. I'm just saying that, right? This is not, generally speaking with a district, we're gonna look for the district to come to us. And we are not looking at Ambler Heights.
So these are
This is not a place that we're gonna ever go back to unless the majority of the neighbors come to us.
Like a fast track for properties that are already on the National Register, a tiered approach between properties that are commercial or religious or, this kind of big landmark as opposed to neighborhoods. And if we can, give some peace of mind to the people of Ambler Heights who are so agitated.
I put it on the record. We're not looking at Ambler Heights. I know.
Is it me or somebody behind me?
Somebody behind you.
I've been trying all night.
Yes.
My name is
Tom
William
Head has
Hopkins.
been in the way.
Lived in the city my whole life, and it's hard to be here because I think we should have been here 20 years ago. I applaud you for what you're doing. Everything you've said, I think, should be enacted and more if we're going to keep the city going. Both of my kids have left the city. They live in Los Angeles, like a lot of families I know, for jobs. They live near Pasadena. We're professional. We went to college, so they're doing better than they did in Cleveland, let me tell you. Pasadena, I go there every year for 2 months. They have a lot more laws than we have for preservation. And it's all for the benefit because I can't even touch a tiny little condo for $700,000 to $800,000 bucks. I've got a middle-class home in Cleveland Heights, my third home. I fixed up 2 before this, all about within a quarter mile of Fairmount Boulevard because I love it. I've never been able to buy into it. It makes me sick when I see a house torn down because nobody I know is moving into Cleveland Heights for a modern house that's just been built. We all love the character, the pre-World War I, the 20s, the beautiful architecture that's irreplaceable. Most modern houses in this city that I have seen, other than 1 or 2, are really totally replaceable. Nobody's building like 1920 anymore. Nobody's building like 1910. I went to school in Cambridge, Mass. People, they know Cleveland Heights. I know a guy, I just met him in LA before I came here. I'm dying to see Cleveland Heights. I've heard so much about it. They're not even saying they want to know Shaker Heights because they've all studied Shaker Heights in their schools. But Cleveland Heights is special. It's got this incredible history, this incredible diversity. I love saving it. I think we should be doing more. And I will only add, as a middle-class resident of this city, I have had to go the line and toe the row for what the city demanded of me for the houses that I fixed up and restored. And I was always able to sell for a bit of a profit for myself. And we finally were able to move into Lamberton, closer to Stratford and those, not Stratford, Scarborough. But, what was I gonna say?
That you jump through the hoops.
It's too much talking in front of all you guys. I get too passionate. But, all these people, I've given to the resource center, to the building resource center. So all of us in the lower end of the city, we've had to pay a good price. It's a lot of fat off of us to keep our house up to snuff. And I resented a little bit when the people, the areas that have done a lot better than me in life, think that their rights are being trampled on because they have the right to tear down a house that the rest of us have spent a lot of our lives driving by wishing we could have only been in that neighborhood. It's a beautiful Ambler Heights neighborhood, just irreplaceable. There's not many like it in this country. Every big city that was big in the 20s or 30s, or not the 30s, the teens had something like it. And if we tear it down, people aren't going to be moving into this city. We'll be shooting ourselves in the feet. Excuse me. So I hope you keep it, and I hope you keep more. Congratulations for what you're doing. I know it's tough.
Yeah. Well, I understand totally what you're saying, and I appreciate that you work very hard for your home. But I can also say that everybody at every level works very hard. The thing that we're all working against is that the homes in Cleveland Heights never can bring what you put into them. So I know you believe that what you put into, you got out of. I would have to kind of think that you're, not really balancing all the numbers. It isn't a home that is in LA that's going to sell for 10 million or 20 million, or you can't. If you're putting $1 million into a home, you're donating the money to the next owner, basically. And we all know that. We all know what it costs to replace a slate roof. So as much as I appreciate trying to make people replace a slate roof, in modern times, you're talking a couple $100,000. And
to do that.
It's more than the cost of a home. Excuse me?
We have not tried to do that.
Well, I understand information,
but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so we're gonna
but
focus back onto
a lot of the things that you have basically stressed, and I agree on many points, but there are always some homes that have not been kept up and cannot be brought back.
So, do we have any other comments? Yes.
Piggybacking on everything, the house that I've lived in for 21 years. We put way more money into it than we will ever get back when we sell. Our taxes have gone up, and your response to me earlier was one of the benefits to the homeowners is that the property value will increase for various reasons that you explained already. If you do decide to designate either particular homes or specific communities, would you consider attaching significant tax credits to those homes?
I mean, we would love to do that, but I think that's
I know.
We're gonna let Eric take that one because these are.
I'm throwing it out there so it's in there. Our taxes have increased through the roof. Some of us have not taken advantage of the schools. So for us, living in Cleveland Heights has simply been this incredible experience. Potholes, trash, you name it. That would be a little nice something.
So we have a citywide tax abatement program, which probably a lot of people don't know much about. And all new construction is eligible for that. So historic preservation would be a component of that, although it's not necessarily called that. So different parts of the city were rated for their need for abatement, but every part of the city has the ability to apply. And so one thing that I think I'm hearing is while sustainability green standards are something that are specifically called out in that tax abatement program, calling out historic preservation as an incentive to say if you invest in it, you can get maybe a higher abatement based upon that investment in or reuse of the historic property.
Proactively, please.
Retroactive.
Retro, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just I'll add, there's another thing that I've been pretty quiet here because this is mostly the Landmark Commission's thing, but one of the things we've been talking about is as the Landmark Commission looks at this ordinance and as we abide by the CLG standards, that's an indication to council that there's value in what the Landmark Commission does, or more value than they already do. And so that's when budgetary conversations can happen. And so the thinking is that should something like this ordinance get passed, or even if it doesn't get passed, coming to council to say, can you create a fund to assist in homeowners who want to work on their landmark properties, that's something that will be up for discussion. So it's that carrot and stick approach.
Anyone online or? Yep. Just making sure no one else online. Yeah, Fran.
I would suggest an FAQ sheet be developed because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how is landmark, what does that mean versus the area, what will you be able to do and not do. I think maybe that would be helpful to provide an FAQ with the questions that have been brought up. Thank you.
We can do that. I will also recommend looking at the design guidelines that came out because a lot of that information is in those as well, but I think it's a good idea to pull them out and have them.
I'm Tom Mormon. I live on Harcourt. Just to piggyback on that, it would be help to be a little more specific than generic kind of this area is not, historic, or because it's really hard for me to get a sense of what makes a landmark property or not, just listening to you talk about what the qualifications are.
So there are qualifications. We have a certain amount of current designated landmarks. In the past, it has often been someone important lived there or a great architect designed it or something along those lines. For us, we have recently added new ones that are trying to embrace all of the history of Cleveland Heights. So we designated one over on Taylor Road on the, what is that cross street? I can't think of it. Over there on the other end of Taylor Road, which is a great house, but represented some of the very early farming history as well as on Change Over Time, which was a great one. There was a nice one that we did on Fairmont Boulevard, which we just designated, has a very interesting architect who was involved. Jewish American architect is involved in a lot of the, actually did what is now the Centrum, but also did synagogues in Cleveland. So there was that kind of interesting history that came to us. Both of those came to us because the owners were interested in landmarking. It's things like that. I mean, we're.
You have a list, right? Is it on the website?
It's all on the web.
I think there's about 75.
Yes, but yes.
That would be right.
Yeah, I think 58 are in the current booklet, but since the booklet was published,
There's a few more that have been
that are.
And there is not a local designated district in the city of Cleveland Heights.
But Fran, you can designate Forest Hills if you like.
All right, any other comments? Hearing none, I think we're good. Do we have any other further comments or anything from the city? Making sure no one online, maybe they're still awake. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.